Hi, and welcome back to another video feature of the Immersive Worlds Handbook. Today, indeed, I'm focusing on the idea of keeping Portland weird, and I'm of course in Portland, Oregon, just outside of Voodoo Donuts, and to my left you'll see the Keep Portland Weird sign, which for some people is famous and others is quite infamous. And I think maybe the division within the city in terms of what this sign means relative to tourism, just outside Voodoo Donuts, we maybe ask some questions about what does a city do to attract tourists and also keep its edge, its uniqueness, its eclecticism? So this video today will focus on this notion of Portland's eclecticism, and I'll be walking through the city, taking you through a number of different venues, restaurants, entertainment venues, museums, sharing with you some of my on-site commentary, and also giving you some voiceover talking about what makes a city unique. It reminds me a little bit of Richard Florida's work on the creative city, because Portland, of course, has such a great deal of creativity within its boundaries. So here's some on-site commentary now. Okay, so I just checked out Flutter, and I'm going to see if I can look at some other vintage shops to see what we find. But, Flutter was on my list because it certainly has that Portland vibe, the Cabinet of Curiosities. If you look at all the boutiques, though, that we're passing here, I mean, every store, has this just amazing sort of Portland feel to it. And I think this is why a lot of people love Portland, is for this sort of eclecticism. So let's continue to look around. Okay, as I was reflecting on there, as we look at Tanner, I visited a number of interesting retail venues in the city during my visit. This again is Tanner Goods, and I really took in the material culture, I took in the ambiance, the aesthetics of it all, and to me there's a very unique vibe that you see certainly in cities like Berlin, San Francisco. In terms of the retail, it's not your typical box stores, it's not your typical retail in terms of chain stores. You get very interesting brands and interesting reflections in the design of the stores. This is the store Flutter, as I mentioned, which is nothing short of a Cabinet of Curiosities. It was so interesting to visit. By the way, check out my many other videos on all of these venues that I discuss in this Keep Portland Weird video today. Next is Paxton Gate, and there's a great episode of Portlandia that makes me think actually of what is so unique in terms of Portland, as they poke a little bit of fun at the eclecticism of some of the stores in Portland. Check out that episode on Portlandia. And then lastly here is Stark's Vacuum Museum, which is another of the many eclectic sites within the city. So back to my on-site commentary in Portland now. So I just checked out Paxton Gate. I have to show you some of the video and images. This tour here in Portland is absolutely amazing when you go to some of these retail shops. They sort of have the natural history taxidermy thing going on, but something much more than that. In addition to that, you just get all these curious things. And I was going to say, if you're going to think about some of the retail experience here in Portland, the word that comes to mind is a Cabinet of Curiosities in terms of some of the things that you do see. Just absolutely amazing, right? Where you get that sense of eclecticism. And it's interesting, I went to the Freaky But True Peculiarium today, and there's some similarity between it's a museum and a store, and a couple of the last retail places here I've visited here on Mississippi Avenue. So we're going to continue the tour. So walking through Portland here, continuing this tour, at times I'm reminded of my time in Houston, just because of the zoning, the lack of zoning there. I mean, you just go through these residential areas where you see houses, and then you see these colorful things like this, these fences. We're going to see a pediatric dentistry right here, and across the street is a tattoo place. So, I mean, it's just absolutely eclectic. Berlin also comes to mind, and certainly in this feature talking about eclectic cities, you'd have to say Berlin, Portland, Seattle, parts of San Francisco, of course. I'm looking right now for the Tanner store, which I heard had an interesting design aesthetic to it, and I don't know if I'm going to find it. I have this map program. It's not actually on my regular map, so we're going to see if we can locate it here. And not to worry, I did eventually find the Tanner store. Again, check out the video I did on it if you want a little more insights about what I discovered inside the store itself. Okay, so that was just checking out Tanner Goods retail store back here. Kind of hard to find, but you can see the some of the design sensibilities that we're noting in some other stores recently. Danner's another one that is reminiscent. And again, everywhere you go, you're just seeing, you know, the eclectic nature of the city. Just behind me, you see this pretty amazing mural back there. So, I mean, there's just always, I think when you're in Portland, there's always something to see and some eclectic cultural experience to behold. You know, as we think about the eclecticism of Portland, we can really detect it everywhere in the city, including at the airport, which has won awards for customer service and friendliness. You see the very interesting micro cinema, the Hollywood theater, which is of course based on the real theater that is in Portland. And this is, I think, one of many signs that when you come to the city, you're in for something quite unique and different. And this is maybe why people like Portland. Even this is within the Nike store. I did a video on this, some of the reclaimed metal work here that you see. For me, as I talk about with the rebuilding store, this is another part, I think, of the eclecticism of the city, what makes it unique. Of course, there are all the big tourist sites. In addition to Voodoo Donuts, you have Powell's World of Books, which I finally visited for the first time. Being a bibliophile, I just love books and research, and so it was great to finally visit and check out their antique book floor and so forth. I also had a chance to go to the Rebuilding Center, and for me, and be sure to check out my video on this, this was one of the most unique sites in the city because I think it develops both an aesthetic appeal in terms of what's happening here with this bricolage or this reuse and remaking through bits and pieces of the city. And it also has a very key political component because, of course, people can rebuild and reuse without having a big carbon footprint, which is a big deal in cities like Portland. I also went to the really cool synth store, Control Voltage, since I'm such a synthesizer addict of sorts. And I just really loved this venue. The staff is incredibly helpful. It's one of a kind. There are only a few of these places really like it anywhere in the world because it has such a boutique feel to it. But it was so great to try out the modular, the semi-modular. Finally tried one of the Arturia keyboards I've been dying to play for a long time, so that was a great visit. I also went to a Sunday market along the riverfront. It was very cool to see this. And what it was the Game of Life that had been given, I guess you could say, a more realistic interpretation. I don't know if they got clearance from, is it Parker Brothers that makes the Life game? But yeah, it's one of many things I think you see at a market in Portland that just really maybe strikes your fancy, or you find it curious because it just has that sense of what is so unique about Portland. And even checking out some of the graffiti, you can't help but notice just the creative signs of the city. There's not a lot of graffiti in Portland, but it reminds me a little bit of Berlin in terms of its overall ambiance. Here's a kind of an up-and-coming brewery. I had a chance to get a beer and had some nachos at, called Breakside, which is near the Funky But True Peculiarium. Stayed at the AC Hotel, which I did a video on, and this is a hotel I think that has a different side of Portland's spirit. It's very nice and trendy, but interesting all the while in terms of its design sensibility. And here's a shot outside my hotel room, and I saw that they were working on maybe the next, I'm not sure what this was going to be, but the next building in Portland. And I had a chance to go to the market in Portland, which was really cool, and had an amazing bowl of ramen, and I'm going to talk to you about it here in a second and use this as another reflection on the overall appeal of the city, including in its culinary senses. So just had some killer ramen at Pine Street Market, and as we exit the building, this is one of the things I think that makes the city cool, a spot like this. Just as far as, giving people variety and really high quality cuisine at the same time. And I guess in that culinary sense, I have to at least feature a picture or two of Voodoo Donuts. I'm not going to get into the debate. You can go on social media and Yelp and determine the value of Voodoo Donuts, but it is famous. Some would say infamous, and it's fitting, I think, in terms of its location across from the Keep Portland Weird sign. All right, I am just leaving the rebuilding center, and I wanted to check this out. You know, if you know anything about Portland, certainly you're familiar with the fact that it's a city that's built on so much creativity and senses of the alternative and so forth. And so this, I think, fits in really well with the ethos that you note in the city. It definitely fits in with the aesthetic of Portland. If you think about what Portland's all about, the sense of the alternative, the sense of the eclectic, and the reuse, I think, really fits in if you think about the sensibility that you experience while you're in Portland. So a lot to reflect on here with the many eclectic venues in the city. And of course, in terms of the architecture, the Portland building by Michael Graves, world famous. I stayed just a few blocks from it. Check out my video I did on the building. So this was one of my draws actually coming to the city, as crazy as that sounds, was to see in person this remarkable piece of postmodern architecture that was groundbreaking when it opened back in the day. You know, just walking throughout the city, you see many wonderful examples of architecture. I don't think as a city it has, you know, it's not certainly Shanghai, it's not Berlin, it's not Copenhagen in terms of some of the postmodern architecture. Of course, it's a much smaller city than those cities that I just mentioned. But it does have some really remarkable and striking architecture. And in addition, just the material culture you see, the facades, the signage as you walk throughout the city. It has this appeal to it that I think really does make it stand as both a creative city and a city of arts and architecture and, of course, the avant-garde. You'll have to check out some of the architecture walking by here. The eclecticism continues. Just look at that. We're on Mississippi Street in Portland. I love how the Mississippi carries over from the one building to the next one. It's pretty cool. Love the architecture. The old and the new look, of course. See the sign on the top there. Very cool. And I thought I would show you an image here, actually video, of it's the Lovecraft Bar. I didn't have a chance to go inside it during my visit, but it's another example, I think, of something unique that you might see maybe in a European city. And this was one of many sites I visited throughout my trip in Portland. I took the city transportation, which was really amazing and cheap. And actually, I'll end this video today talking about this incident of sorts. I was trying to find the Keep Portland Weird sign, and I know there's a lot of debate about whether or not the sign is something that people should recognize or enjoy, kind of like the Seattle gum wall, Pike's Market. You know, is it touristy? Is it something really that the city residents want to latch onto in terms of identity? Reminds me a little bit of an episode or discussion about Portlandia's episodes and how some Portland residents either have never watched the show or they feel like maybe it's too irreverent or it doesn't present a positive image. That's up to debate. That's subjective. So I found what I thought was the Keep Portland Weird sign. I went way the heck, like 45, 50-minute bus trip. And I thought this was it. And then I thought, this is a little strange. It looks different. It's actually a second Keep Portland Weird sign. And for some reason on my app, my Maps app, it took me to this location. And of course, most of you know, it's just right across from Voodoo Donuts. And so it was very easy to find. But a couple days later, I found the real Keep Portland Weird sign. But it was cool to see a second one, which was above this. I think it was a record store or CD store. So here is above Dante's music venue, the actual Keep Portland Weird sign. And again, I think for people, the debate would be, is this a positive thing, or is it something that just has a touristy feel to it? I think in answering the question about tourism and creative cities and what attracts people to cities like Portland or Berlin or San Francisco, you know, Seattle as well, there are many reasons. And I think a city has to have balance. It has to have balance with its creativity, its avant-garde spirit, its aesthetics, its architecture, its consumer haunts, which a lot of people don't like, and tourist attractions like this. The tourist, of course, is seen a little bit as a dotard, as someone who's not very smart, as someone who just wants to see the most recognizable sites, keep Portland weird, go to Voodoo Donuts, go to some of the other centers of the city that maybe have that sense of the spirit of what the city is. And I think locals would say it's not necessarily the case. And so this debate will no doubt continue to rage on in terms of what makes Portland weird, or if it is weird, and should we be referring to it as such? Should there be a sign proclaiming it as such? Is it too hipster-esque, if you will, to have a sign that proclaims that you're weird and that you're trying to keep Portland weird? And it's a question actually that comes up with Burning Man, with the creativity and the spirit of Burning Man. Some people feel like the avant-garde spirit of Burning Man is being lost because it's becoming too corporate. It's becoming too much focused on hipster, faux avant-garde and subcultural traditions that don't have any authenticity to them. I don't know, but my trip to the city was really amazing. It was a trip that was long overdue, these many years, and so it was just a joy to be able to visit and to take in some of the sights of the city. I hope you enjoyed the video tour today. I do also want to encourage you to check out my other videos on Portland. I did a series of maybe 15 to 20 different videos on many of the venues I talked about in the city. Some of them are pictured here. This is just a image from my Flickr page, which I think perfectly captures the spirit of Portland as a city. Subcultural, avant-garde, eclectic, some consumerism, some tourism, some friendliness, sense of the eclectic running throughout the city, incredible people, culinary spirit, and many of the other things that I think we want in all of our cities. And so I hope that Portland will be seen as a model city that might inspire other creative cities around the world. So as always, please do come back for additional video features of the Immersive World's Handbook.